Hello, I'm here. I made it. And I have a couch full of rubbish to prove it. Hi. Um, I hope that Danny is here. That's so rude. There were 3 people, and then as soon as I went live and said hello, 2 of them left. That's great. Hello, 2 people. Okay, quick recap. My mind isn't working well. I have migraine today. Hey, what's up? I was worried my internet was just disconnecting itself again, but seems fine. Yes, so the time before last time, Carmilla mysteriously vanished overnight, and they looked for her everywhere, and it turned out she'd fallen asleep in a cupboard, which is such a Megan move. I have to kind of respect that. And I got really mad at their lack of detective skills, but then they said they did search that cupboard, so she was out, vampiring all the hot girls from the villages and killing them. She has also been vampiring Laura, our heroine, who's one of the biggest idiots known to man. Laura's father has just realized that his daughter is being vampired, and he invited a doctor to see her and then wouldn't tell her what the doctor said, because this is olden days times and it would do her no good to know, probably. Also, we got a little bit of a callback to General Spielsdorf. General, I forgot his name. General Spielsdorf, whose daughter was the girl originally coming to stay with Laura until she got vampired by Carmilla, but we don't know that yet. Now he's gone mental and he's a vampire hunter, but Laura and her father don't really know that. Actually, her father might. I think the doctor might know something about vampires from his reaction, but the general is here in person now. Is there anything else that's relevant to recap? Carmilla is a vampire and Laura's super gay for her, but she doesn't know what being gay is or if it's possible. So initially she thought Carmilla was maybe a boy in disguise. Carmilla is super gay for Laura and she definitely knows what she's doing. Go Carmilla, my opinion. Okay. We can crack into chapter 10, Bereaved. The General Spielsdorf, has just arrived. It was about 10 months since we had last seen him, but that time had sufficed to make an alteration of years in his appearance. He had grown thinner. Something of gloom and anxiety had taken the place of that cordial serenity which used to characterize his features. His dark blue eyes, always penetrating, now gleamed with a sterner light from under his shaggy grey eyebrows. It was not such a change as grief alone usually induces, and angrier passions seemed to have had their share in bringing it about. Ooh, General's a silver fox. Like it. We had not long resumed our drive when the General began to talk, with his usual soldierly directness, of the bereavement, as he termed it, which he had sustained in the death of his beloved niece and ward. And he then broke out in a tone of intense bitterness and fury, inveighing against the hellish arts to which she had fallen a victim, and expressing, with more exasperation than piety, his wonder that heaven should tolerate so monstrous an indulgence of the lusts and malignity of hell. That is a very cool way to describe being a lesbian. It sounds amazing. A monstrous indulgence of the lusts and malignity of hell. I'm pretty sure the niece just got fucked to death by Carmilla. I don't think it was vampire related. My father, who saw at once that something very extraordinary had befallen, asked him, if not too painful to him, to detail the circumstances which he thought justified the strong terms in which he expressed himself. I should tell you with all pleasure, said the general, but you would not believe me. Why should I not? He asked. Because, he answered testily, you believe in nothing but what consists with your own prejudices and illusions. I remember when I was like you, but I have learned better. Try me, said my father. I am not such a dogmatist as you suppose. Besides which, I very well know that you generally require proof for what you believe, and am therefore very strongly predisposed to respect your conclusions. He's a man. He has the kind of brain that can understand things. You can trust him. You are right in supposing that I have not been led lightly into a belief in the marvellous, for what I have experienced is marvellous, and I have been forced by extraordinary evidence to credit that which ran counter diametrically to all my theories. I have been made the dupe of a preternatural conspiracy. Notwithstanding his professions of confidence in the general's penetration, I saw my father at this point glance at the general with, as I thought, a marked suspicion of his sanity. Sorry, Laura's dad is very confident in the general's penetration. I'm 12 years old. It's good. Keeps me young. The general did not see it, luckily. Not the penetration, the suspicion. He was looking gloomily and curiously into the glades and vistas of the woods that were opening before us. You are going to the ruins of Carnston, he said. Carmilla's ancestral home, but we don't know that. Except that there's a portrait of Mircalla Carnstein, which is an anagram for Carmilla, and it looks exactly like her down to the mole on her throat, which is a pretty good Tomi reference. Junji Ito, he must have been a fan. Hi, Jesse. Hi, we're not too far in. Basically, the general's just arrived, whose niece, not daughter, got vampired to death by Carmilla. Oh, yeah, in the army, they teach them a lot about penetration, I think. I took an army paper once. It was taught by a brigadier. He was so funny. He always told us, never go out with soldiers. You don't know where they've been. But I do. And then he would laugh and we'd just be like, okay, thanks. I don't remember anything about what was in the paper. Yeah, so that's all that's happened so far. You are going to the ruins of Carnston, the general said. Yes, it is a lucky coincidence. Do you know, I was going to ask you to bring me there to inspect them. I have a special object in exploring. There is a ruined chapel, ain't there, with a great many tombs of that extinct family? So there are. Highly interesting, said my father. I hope you are thinking of claiming the title and estates. My father said this gaily, but the general did not recollect the laugh or even the smile which courtesy exacts for a friend's joke. On the contrary, he looked grave and even fierce, ruminating on a matter that stirred his anger and horror. Something very different, he said gruffly. I mean to unearth some of those fine people. I hope, by God's blessing, to accomplish a pious sacrilege there, which will relieve our earth of certain monsters and enable honest people to sleep in their beds without being assailed by murderers. I have strange things to tell you, my dear friend, such as I myself would have scouted as incredible a few months since. My father looked at him again, but this time not with a glance of suspicion, with an eye, rather, of keen intelligence and alarm. The house of Carnston, he said, has been long extinct, 100 years at least. My dear wife was maternally descended from the Carnstons. But the name and title have long since ceased to exist. The castle is a ruin. The very village is deserted. It is 50 years since the smoke of a chimney was seen there. Not a roof left. Interesting. Laura and Carmilla are kind of related. Not much. There's a few hundred years between them. That's fine. Quite true. I have heard a great deal about that since I last saw you. A great deal that will astonish you. But I had better relate everything in the order in which it occurred, said the general. You saw my dear ward, my child, I may call her. No creature could have been more beautiful. and only 3 months ago, none more blooming. Yes, poor thing. When I saw her last, she certainly was quite lovely, said my father. I was grieved and shocked, more than I can tell you, my dear friend. I know what a blow it was to you. He took the general's hand, and they exchanged a kind pressure. Tears gathered in the old soldier's eyes. He did not seek to conceal them. He said, "We have been very old friends. I knew you would feel for me, childless as I am." She had become an object of very near interest to me, and repaid my care by an affection that cheered my home and made my life happy. That is all gone. The years that remain to me on earth may not be very long, but by God's mercy I hope to accomplish a service to mankind before I die, and to subserve the vengeance of heaven upon the fiends who have murdered my poor child in the spring of her hopes and beauty. You said just now that you intended relating everything as it occurred, said my father. Pray do. I assure you that it is not mere curiosity that prompts me. Yes, at the moment I'm being prompted by frustration, because he keeps going, "Oh, I'll tell you everything from the beginning. Just do it." By this time, we had reached the point at which the Drunstall road, by which the general had come, diverges from the road which we were travelling to Karnstein. How far is it to the ruins? Inquired the general, looking anxiously forward. About half a league, answered my father. Pray let us hear the story that you were so good as to promise. Chapter 11. Oh, chapter fucking about. The story. It's called Chapter 11, The Story. With all my heart, said the general, with an effort. And after a short pause in which to arrange his subject, he commenced one of the strangest narratives I ever heard. My dear child was looking forward with great pleasure to the visit you had been so good as to arrange for her to your charming daughter. Here he made me a gallant but melancholy bow. In the meantime, we had an invitation to my old friend, the Count Carlsfeld, whose schloss is about 6 leagues to the other side of Karnstein. It was to attend the series of fetes which, do you remember, were given by him in honour of his illustrious visitor, the Grand Duke Charles. Yes, and very splendid, I believe they were, said my father. Princely. But then his hospitalities are quite regal. He has Aladdin's lamp. The night from which my sorrow dates was devoted to a magnificent masquerade. The doors were thrown open. The trees hung with coloured lamps. There was such a display of fireworks as Paris itself had never witnessed. And such music. Music, you know, is my weakness. Such ravishing music. The finest instrumental band perhaps in the world, and the finest singers who could be collected from all the great operas in Europe. As you wandered through these fantastically illuminated grounds, the moonlighted chateau throwing a rosy light from its long rows of windows, you could suddenly hear these ravishing voices stealing from the silence of some grove, or rising from boats upon the lake. I felt myself, as I looked and listened, carried back into the romance and poetry of my early youth. When the fireworks were ended, and the ball beginning, we returned to a noble suite of rooms that were thrown open to the dancers. A masked ball, you know, is a beautiful sight, but so brilliant a spectacle of the kind I never saw before. It was a very aristocratic assembly. I was myself almost the only nobody present. My dear child was looking quite beautiful. She wore no mask. Her excitement and delight added an unspeakable charm to her features, always lovely. I remarked a young lady, dressed magnificently but wearing a mask, who appeared to me to be observing my ward with extraordinary interest. I had seen her earlier in the evening in the great hall, and again for a few minutes walking near us, on the terrace under the castle windows, similarly employed. A lady, also masked, richly and gravely dressed, and with a stately air like a person of rank, accompanied her as a chaperone. Had the young lady not worn a mask, I could, of course, have been much more certain upon the question whether she was really watching my poor darling. I am now well assured that she was. That is so romantic. They met at a masked ball. That's beautiful. I got a Diet Coke. Courtesy of John, thank you. I went to this amazing party and yet would never taste anything like Diet Coke. I don't know what old time people would think of it. They'd probably think it was poison, and they would be right. Oh, hello, number 4. We are talking about a beautiful masked ball where the general's niece is about to meet Carmilla. So romantic. It's beautiful. We were now in one of the salons. My poor dear child had been dancing and was resting a little in one of the chairs near the door. I was standing near. The 2 ladies I have mentioned, had approached, and the younger took the chair next to my ward, while her companion stood beside me, and for a little time addressed herself in a low tone to her charge. Availing herself of the privilege of her mask, she turned to me, and in the tone of an old friend, and calling me by my name, opened a conversation with me, which piqued my curiosity a good deal. She referred to many scenes where she had met me, at court and at distinguished houses. She alluded to little incidents which I had long since ceased to think of, but which, I found, had only lain in abeyance in my memory, for they instantly started into life at her touch. I became more and more curious to ascertain who she was every moment. She parried my attempts to discover very adroitly and pleasantly. The knowledge she showed of many passages in my life seemed to me all but unaccountable, and she appeared to take a not unnatural pleasure in foiling my curiosity, and in seeing me flounder in my eager perplexity from one conjecture to another. Reminds me of the time I called my Nana's house, and she told me my uncle, who I refer to on here as Pussy Dracula, Uncle Pussy Dracula was here, and then she said, "Oh, guess who wants to talk to you?" and put me on the phone with a woman. And I was just trying to feel out, hey, which of my uncle's girlfriends is this one? I managed. It was his ex-wife. She's doing well. In the meantime, the young lady, whom her mother called by the odd name of Milaka when she once or twice addressed her, had, with the same ease and grace, got into conversation with my ward. Now, we know that Rocella and Carmilla are anagrams, so I'm going to type out Milaka in the chat. Clever. She introduced herself by saying that her mother was a very old acquaintance of mine. She spoke of the agreeable audacity which a mask rendered practicable. She talked like a friend. She admired her dress and insinuated very prettily her admiration of her beauty. She amused her with laughing criticisms upon the people who crowded the ballroom, and laughed at my poor child's fun. She was very witty and lively when she pleased, and after a time they had grown very good friends, and the young stranger lowered her mask, displaying a remarkably beautiful face. I had never seen it before, neither had my dear child. But though it was new to us, the features were so engaging, as well as lovely, that it was impossible not to feel the attraction powerfully. My poor girl did so. I never saw anyone more taken with another at first sight, unless indeed it was the stranger herself, who seemed quite to have lost her heart to her. Oh, it was love at first sight. That's really nice. I mean, it isn't, because one of them's dead now, but you could say that of everyone in history times. In the meantime, availing myself of the license of a masquerade, I put not a few questions to the elder lady. "You have puzzled me utterly," I said, laughing. "Is that not enough? Won't you now consent to stand on equal terms, and do me the kindness to remove your mask?" "Can any request be more unreasonable?" she replied. "Ask a lady to yield an advantage? Besides, how do you know you should recognize me? Years make changes." "As you see," I said, with a bow, and I suppose a rather melancholy little laugh. "As philosophers tell us," she said. "And how do you know that a sight of my face would help you?" "I should take chance for that," I answered. "It is vain trying to make yourself out an old woman. Your figure betrays you." General! Yeah, Romeo and Juliet's a love story, and they would be dead by now anyway, so if you think about it. It's actually not sad, apart from all the other people who died in the course of it. Oh, General, you saucy devil. Years, nevertheless, have passed since I saw you, rather since you saw me, for that is what I am considering. Milaka there is my daughter. I cannot then be young, even in the opinion of people whom time has taught to be indulgent, and I may not like to be compared with what you remember me. You have no mask to remove. You can offer me nothing in exchange. My petition is to your pity to remove it, and mine to yours to let it stay where it is, she replied. Well, then, at least you will tell me whether you are French or German. You speak both languages so perfectly. I've been speaking English this whole time. I don't think I shall tell you that, General. You intend a surprise, and are meditating the particular point of attack. At all events, you won't deny this, I said, that being honoured by your permission to converse, I ought to know how to address you. Shall I say Madame la Comtesse? She laughed, and she would no doubt have met me with another evasion, if indeed I can treat any occurrence in an interview which, every circumstance of which was prearranged, as I now believe, with the profoundest cunning, as liable to be modified by accident. As to that, she began, but she was interrupted, almost as she opened her lips, by a gentleman dressed in black, who looked particularly elegant and distinguished, with this drawback, that his face was the most deadly pale I ever saw, except in death. He was in no masquerade, in the plain evening dress of a gentleman, and he said, without a smile, but with a courtly and unusually low bow, "Will Madame la Comtesse permit me to say a very few words which may interest her?" The lady turned quickly to him, and touched her lip in token of silence. She then said to me, "Keep my place for me, General. I shall return when I have said a few words." And with this injunction, playfully given, she walked a little aside with the gentleman in black, and talked for some minutes, apparently very earnestly. They then walked away slowly together in the crowd, and I lost them for some minutes. I spent the interval in cudgelling my brains for a conjecture as to the identity of the lady who seemed to remember me so kindly, and I was thinking of turning about and joining in the conversation between my pretty ward and the Countess's daughter, and trying whether, by the time she returned, I might not have a surprise in store for her, by having her name, title, chateau, and estates at my fingers' ends. But at this moment she returned, accompanied by the pale man in black, who said, "I shall return and inform Madame la Comtesse when her carriage is at the door." He withdrew with a bow. Very fascinating chapter. Now we are on to chapter 12, a petition, which, I'm just going to steamroll into because it's all the one chapter, really. What secret did he give away? Oh, that she is a countess? I don't know. I think he just overheard the general saying that. But maybe not. Exactly. French and Saunders did a really short comedy program set in the French Revolution. Well, just before the Revolution, in the salons of France. And they'd always refer to Countess Jennifer Saunders. They'd refer to her husband as the old Comte, which is how you pronounce it, but is also very funny. The show wasn't that great. It was okay, but I think they only made 6 episodes or something. Let Them Eat Cake, that's what it was called. Poor old Comte. Chapter 12, a petition. Then we are to lose Madame la Comtesse, but I hope only for a few hours, I said, with a low bow. And maybe that only, or maybe a few weeks. It was very unlucky his speaking to me just now as he did. Do you now know me? I assured her I did not. You shall know me, she said, but not at present. We are older and better friends than perhaps you suspect. I cannot yet declare myself. I shall in 3 weeks pass your beautiful Schloss, about which I've been making inquiries. That is not German for ass, it's German for castle. I'm sure his ass is beautiful as well. I'm sure she's been making inquiries. I shall then look in upon you for an hour or two, and renew a friendship which I never think of without 1,000 pleasant recollections. This moment a piece of news has reached me like a thunderbolt. I must set out now, and travel by a devious route nearly 100 miles with all the dispatch I can possibly make. My perplexities multiply. I am only deterred by the compulsory reserve I practice as to my name from making a very singular request of you. My poor child has not yet recovered her strength. The horse fell with her at a hunt which she had ridden out to witness. Her nerves have not yet recovered the shock, and our physician says that she must on no account exert herself for some time to come. We came here, in consequence, by very easy stages, hardly 6 leagues a day. I must now travel day and night on a mission of life and death, a mission the critical and momentous nature of which I shall be able to explain to you when we meet, as I hope we shall in a few weeks, without the necessity of any concealment. It's harsh. Exactly. About which I have been making inquiries. She went on to make her petition, and it was in the tone of a person from whom such a request amounted to conferring rather than seeking a favour. This was only in manner, and as it seemed, quite unconsciously. In the terms in which it was expressed, nothing could be more deprecatory. It was simply that I would consent to take charge of her daughter during her absence. I mean, at least this time, there's a pretense that the mother knows the strange dude that she's leaving her daughter with for 3 weeks. When she crashed into Laura's dad's schloss, she was just like, oh, well, you guys look nice. Take my kid. I'll be back, probably. Then again, I think the general was slightly savvier than Laura's dad. This was, all things considered, a strange, not to say an audacious request. She in some sort disarmed me by stating and admitting everything that could be urged against it, and throwing herself entirely upon my chivalry. At the same moment, by a fatality that seems to have predetermined all that happened, my poor child came to my side, and in an undertone besought me to invite her new friend Malaka to pay us a visit. She had just been sounding her, and thought, if her mamma would allow her, she would like it extremely. At another time, I should have told her to wait a little, until at least we knew who they were. Yes, he is way smarter than Laura's dad. He wants to know who people are before he lets them stay in his castle and hang out with his daughter. But I had not a moment to think in. The two ladies assailed me together, and I must confess the refined and beautiful face of the young lady, about which there was something extremely engaging, as well as the elegance and fire of high birth, determined me, and quite overpowered, I submitted, and undertook too easily the care of the young lady, whom her mother called Malaka. The Countess beckoned to her daughter, who listened with grave attention while she told her, in general terms, how suddenly and peremptorily she had been summoned, and also of the arrangements she had made for her under my care, adding that I was one of her earliest and most valued friends. I made, of course, such speeches as the case seemed to call for, and found myself, on reflection, in a position which I did not half like. The gentleman in black returned, and very ceremoniously conducted the lady from the room. The demeanour of this gentleman was such as to impress me with the conviction that the Countess was a lady of very much more importance than her modest title alone might have led me to assume. Her last charge to me was that no attempt was to be made to learn more about her than I might have already guessed, until her return. Our distinguished host, whose guest she was, knew her reasons. But here, she said, neither I nor my daughter could safely remain for more than a day. I removed my mask imprudently for a moment, about an hour ago, and, too late, I fancied you saw me. So I resolved to seek an opportunity of talking a little to you. Had I found that you had seen me, I would have thrown myself on your high sense of honour to keep my secret some weeks. As it is, I am satisfied that you did not see me. But if you now suspect, or on reflection should suspect, who I am, I commit myself in like manner entirely to your honour. My daughter will observe the same secrecy, and I well know that you will from time to time remind her, lest she should thoughtlessly disclose it. It's very normal to want to hide your identity for about 3 weeks. It's hot here today. It's not pleasant. There are blackbirds eating cat biscuits outside. She whispered a few words to her daughter, kissed her hurriedly twice, and went away, accompanied by the pale gentleman in black, and disappeared in the crowd. In the next room, said Malacca, there is a window that looks upon the hall door. I should like to see the last of Mamma and to kiss my hand to her. Hey, Danny. Oh, I would have waited. Okay. Quick recap. The general who went mental and now he's a vampire hunter because his niece was killed by, well, we can't really say Carmilla yet, but he has just arrived. They're going to the ancestral castle of the Carnstons, and on the way he's telling the story of how his niece and a mysterious girl called Milaka met at a masquerade ball and instantly fell in love, and it's very beautiful actually. And then of course he got stuck with Milaka in his castle because the mother figure took off and was like, don't tell anyone who I am for 3 weeks. He also doesn't know who she is. That's okay. That's okay. That's why I'm recapping. So we've just got up to the bit where Milaka's mother, can't remember if she is her mother or not, I don't think she is just pretending to have a family emergency and taking off from the masquerade ball and dumping her daughter with the general. So the general's telling this story to Laura and her father, who are in the carriage, and I don't think either of the female tutors are with them. Just a blackbird. Yeah. Do you have any questions before I carry on? Nope. Okay. Okay. In the next room, said Malacca, there is a window that looks upon the hall door. I should like to see the last of Mamma and to kiss my hand to her. We assented, of course, and accompanied her to the window. We looked out and saw a handsome old-fashioned carriage with a troop of couriers and footmen. We saw the slim figure of the pale gentleman in black as he held a thick velvet cloak and placed it about her shoulders and threw the hood over her head. She nodded to him and just touched his hand with hers. He bowed low repeatedly as the door closed and the carriage began to move. She is gone, said Malacca with a sigh. She is gone, I repeated to myself for the first time in the hurried moments that had elapsed since my consent, reflecting upon the folly of my act. She did not look up, said the young lady plaintively. The countess had taken off her mask, perhaps, and did not care to show her face, I said, and she could not know that you were in the window. She sighed and looked at my face. She was so beautiful that I relented. I was sorry I had for a moment repented of my hospitality, and I determined to make her amends for the unavowed churlishness of my reception. So the general was a lot smarter than Laura's dad. He thinks it's weird and fishy and probably dumb to take on a stranger's kid for 3 weeks with an oath of secrecy about who they are. Didn't say him either. Well, he's all right. Didn't save his niece. The young lady, replacing her mask. Yeah, she's pretty. Good people are pretty. I learned that from Tolkien. Bad people are orcs, and they're super gross, and they talk with low accents, and that's how you know you can't trust them. But Galadriel is very pretty, so it's all good. Fuck Galadriel, man. I fucking hate Cate Blanchett. I don't know why. I just hate her face. It's bad to me. It's bad to look at to me. Not as bad as Kristen Bell, but it is still bad. Sorry, Kate Blanchett. What, Kate Blanchett? Kristen Bell. Kristen Bell. Or Carmilla. All I remember... Oh, Galadriel, yeah. Yeah. Well, I just remember how funny it was when they showed up at fucking Lothlorien, and Galadriel's husband looks stoned. He looks high as hell. She's just like, oh, Gandalf is not with you. And fucking Celeborn comes out and he's like, yes, Gandalf is not with you. And they're like, yeah, he died. And he is not with you. Nope, died earlier on. I don't know what that I don't know what the direction was like for that performance, but it's funny. I like it. Back to the story. The young lady, replacing her mask, joined my ward in persuading me to return to the grounds, where the concert was soon to be renewed. We did so, and walked up and down the terrace that lies under the castle windows. Malaka became very intimate with us. Both of you? Oh, General. And amused us with lively descriptions and stories of most of the great people whom we saw upon the terrace. I liked her more and more every minute. Her gossip, without being ill-natured, was extremely diverting to me, who had been so long out of the great world. I thought what life she would give to our sometimes lonely evenings at home. Ironic. The ball was not over until the morning sun had almost reached the horizon. It pleased the Grand Duke to dance till then, so loyal people could not go away or think of bed. We had just got through a crowded saloon, when my ward asked me what had become of Malaka. I thought she had been by her side, and she fancied she was by mine. The fact was, we had lost her. Just like last week when they lost Carmilla, but she was just asleep in a cupboard. Okay, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that falling asleep in a cupboard for a few hours is also not a universal childhood experience. I used to like to go into the cupboard with a torch and read a book, maybe fall asleep. It happens, is what I'm saying. All my efforts to find her were vain. I feared she had mistaken, in the confusion of a momentary separation from us, other people for her new friends, and had possibly pursued and lost them in the extensive grounds which were thrown open to us. Now, in its full force, I recognised a new folly in my having undertaken the charge of a young lady without so much as knowing her name, and fettered as I was by promises, of the reasons for imposing which I knew nothing. I could not even point my inquiries by saying that the missing young lady was the daughter of the Countess who had taken her departure a few hours before. Morning broke. It was clear daylight before I gave up my search. It was not till near 2 o'clock next day that we heard anything of my missing charge. I don't doubt it, and I'm sorry because it probably wasn't funny at the time, but I don't doubt it at all. Also, Carmilla rules. She doesn't get up until 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and she just has a big cup of hot chocolate and hangs out making fun of people. Blackbird skin. 2 o'clock next day. At about that time, a servant knocked at my niece's door to say that he had been earnestly requested by a young lady who appeared to be in great distress to make out where she could find the General Baron Spielsdorf and the young lady, his daughter, in whose charge she had been left by her mother. There could be no doubt, notwithstanding the slight inaccuracy, that our young friend had turned up, and so she had. Would to heaven we had lost her. She told my poor child a story to account for our having failed to recover us for so long. Very late, she said, she had got to the housekeeper's bedroom in despair of finding us, and had then fallen into a deep sleep, which, long as it was, had hardly sufficed to recruit her strength after the fatigues of the ball. That day Malaka came home with us. I was only too happy, after all, to have secured so charming a companion for my dear girl. Oh, General, you were smart, and it didn't help. Now we're up to chapter 13, The Woodman, which I'm just going to crack on because it is all part of the same story. There soon, however, appeared some drawbacks. In the first place, Malaka complained of extreme languor, the weakness that remained after her late illness, and she never emerged from her room till the afternoon was pretty far advanced. In the next place, it was accidentally discovered, although she always locked the door on the inside, and never disturbed the key from its place till she admitted the maid to assist at her toilet, that she was undoubtedly sometimes absent from her room in the very early morning, and at various times later in the day, before she wished it to be understood that she was stirring. She was repeatedly seen from the windows of the Schloss, in the first faint grey of the morning, walking through the trees in an easterly direction, and looking like a person in a trance. This convinced me that she walked in her sleep, but this hypothesis did not solve the puzzle. How did she pass out from her room, leaving the door locked on the inside? How did she escape from the house without unbarring door or window? In the midst of my perplexities, an anxiety of a far more urgent kind presented itself. Just a quick reminder that when this happened at Laura's dad's house, they all thought there was a completely unrelated female ghost walking around, so the General has a lot more going on than anyone in Laura's household. My dear child began to lose her looks and health, and that in a manner so mysterious and even horrible that I became thoroughly frightened. She was at first visited by appalling dreams, then, as she fancied, by a spectre, sometimes resembling Malaka, sometimes in the shape of a beast, indistinctly seen, walking round the foot of her bed from side to side. This is penetrating intellect. Oh, General. And now he wants to penetrate the dead Constance with a stake, presumably. He is relentless. Like a vampire hunter Terminator. I was trying to think of a pun, but it's not worth it. Lastly came sensations. One, not unpleasant, but very peculiar, she said, resembled the flow of an icy stream against her breast. At a later time, she felt something like a pair of large needles pierce her, a little below the throat, with a very sharp pain. A few nights after, followed a gradual and convulsive sense of strangulation. Then came unconsciousness. And now we're back in Laura, I could hear distinctly every word the kind old General was saying, because by this time we were driving upon the short grass that spreads on either side of the road as you approached the roofless village which had not shown the smoke of a chimney for more than half a century. You may guess how strangely I felt as I heard my own symptoms so exactly described in those which had been experienced by the poor girl who, but for the catastrophe which followed, would have been at that moment a visitor at my father's chateau. You may suppose also how I felt as I heard him detail habits and mysterious peculiarities which were, in fact, those of our beautiful guest, Carmilla. Carmilla Malaka. It's a mystery. A vista opened in the forest. We were on a sudden under the chimneys and gables of the ruined village, and the towers and battlements of the dismantled castle, round which gigantic trees are grouped, overhung us from a slight eminence. In a frightened dream, I got down from the carriage, and in silence, for we had each abundant matter for thinking, we soon mounted the ascent and were among the spacious chambers, winding stairs, and dark corridors of the castle. And this was once the palatial residence of the Karnsteins, said the old General at length, as from a great window he looked out across the village and saw the wide, undulating expanse of forest. It was a bad family, and here its blood-stained annals were written, he continued. It is hard that they should, after death, continue to plague the human race with their atrocious lusts. That is the chapel at the Karnsteins, down there. He pointed down to the grey walls of the Gothic building, partly visible to the foliage, a little way down the steep. And I hear the axe of a woodman, he added, busy among the trees that surround it. He possibly may give us the information of which I am in search, and point out the grave of Mircalla, Countess of Karnstein. These rustics preserve the local traditions of great families, whose stories die out among the rich and titled as soon as the families themselves become extinct. Yep, those dumb rustic peasants remembering things like idiots. We have a portrait at home of Mircalla, the Countess Karnstein. Should you like to see it? Asked my father. Time enough, dear friend, replied the general. I believe that I have seen the original, and one motive which has led me to you earlier than I at first intended was to explore the chapel which we are now approaching. What, see the Countess Mircalla? Exclaimed my father. Why, she has been dead more than a century. Not as dead as you fancy, I am told, answered the general. I confess, General, you puzzle me utterly, replied my father. How? Sorry. Looking at him, I fancied for a moment with a return of the suspicion I detected before. But although there was anger and detestation at times in the old general's manner, there was nothing flighty. It remains to me, he said, as we passed under the heavy arch of the Gothic church, for its dimensions would have justified its being so styled, but one object which can interest me during the few years that remain to me on earth, and that is to wreak on her the vengeance which, I thank God, may still be accomplished by a mortal arm. What vengeance can you mean? Asked my father, in increasing amazement, because he was a huge dummy, a real idiot, real doofus hours at the schloss of my father, Laura's dad, who also doesn't have a name. I mean to decapitate the monster, the general answered, with a fierce flush, and a stamp that echoed mournfully through the hollow ruin, and his clenched hand was at the same moment raised, as if it grasped the handle of an axe, while he shook it ferociously in the air. Yeah, it could be an axe. What? Exclaimed my father, more than ever bewildered. To strike her head off. Cut her head off. Aye, with a hatchet, with a spade, with anything that can cleave through her murderous throat. You shall hear, he answered, trembling with rage. And hurrying forward, he said, That beam will answer for a seat. Your dear child is fatigued. Let her be seated, and I will, in a few sentences, close my dreadful story. A squared block of wood, which lay in the grass-grown pavement of the chapel, formed a bench on which I was very glad to seat myself, and in the meantime the general called to the woodman, who had been removing some boughs which leaned upon the old walls, and, axe in hand, the hardy old fellow stood before us. He could not tell us anything of these monuments, but there was an old man, he said, a ranger of this forest, at present sojourning in the house of the priest, about 2 miles away, who could point out every monument of the old Karnstein family, and for a trifle he undertook to bring him back with him, if we would lend him one of our horses, in little more than half an hour. Have you been long employed about this forest? Asked my father of the old man. I have been a woodman here, he answered in his patois, under the forester all my days. So has my father before me, and so on, as many generations as I can count up. I could show you the very house in the village here in which my ancestors lived. How came the village to be deserted? Asked the general. It was troubled by revenants, sir. Several were tracked to their graves, there detected by the usual tests, and extinguished in the usual way, by decapitation, by the stake, and by burning, but not until many of the villagers were killed. But after all these proceedings according to law, he continued, so many graves opened, so many vampires deprived of their horrible animation, the village was not relieved. But a Moravian gentleman, who happened to be travelling this way, heard how matters were, and being skilled, as many people are in his country in such affairs, he offered to deliver the village from its tormentor. He did so thus. There being a bright moon that night, he ascended, shortly after sunset, the towers of the chapel here, from whence he could distinctly see the churchyard beneath him. You can see it from that window. From this point he watched until he saw the vampire come out of his grave, and place near it the linen clothes in which he had been folded, and then glide away towards the village to plague its inhabitants. The stranger, having seen all this, came down from the steeple, took the linen wrappings of the vampire, and carried them up to the top of the tower, which he again mounted. When the vampire returned from his prowlings and missed his clothes, he cried furiously to the Moravian, whom he saw at the summit of the tower, and who, in reply, beckoned him to ascend and take them. Whereupon the vampire, accepting his invitation, began to climb the steeple, and so soon as he had reached the battlements, the Moravian, with a stroke of his sword, clove his skull in twain, hurling him down to the churchyard, whither, descending by the winding stairs, the stranger followed and cut his head off, and next day delivered it and the body to the villagers, who duly impaled and burnt them. This Moravian nobleman had authority from the then head of the family to remove the tomb of Mircalla, Countess Carnston, which he did effectually, so that in a little while its site was quite forgotten. Can you point out where it stood? Asked the general eagerly. The forester shook his head and smiled. Not a soul living could tell you that now, he said. Besides, they say her body was removed, but no one is sure of that either. Having thus spoken, as time pressed, he dropped his axe and departed, leaving us to hear the remainder of the general's strange story. It's an interesting bit of vampire mythology that I haven't really come across before. That he has to... the vampire has to get back into his tomb, but he also has to get back into his shroud. How would that work? You'd only have so long before the linen would break down. Maybe that's why there aren't any vampires today. Maybe that's why vampires today live forever. Because we have polyester. Oh, shit. Polyester sucks. It's ruined everything. It's giving us more vampires than ever. Well, I've been reading for about... Oh yeah, the Shroud of Terror never broke down, that's true. Obviously, Jesus is the most famous vampire in the world, and I would never want him to go away. He's the best one. But yeah, I've been reading for about an hour now, and it's 8:30. But yes, thank you all very much for being here, and the next chapter, chapter 14, is called The Meeting, and I'm pretty sure the general's about to explain things in a way that even Laura's dad can't be stupid about, although he will, and then I'll yell about that. But yes, thank you very much. I think the next video will probably be the last one, and then I will jump on to maybe Dracula, but I feel like that's too well known. Thanks for being here, Jessie. Sorry about the short notice. I've been having migraines and naps, and I'm very tired and vampired. I have so much makeup on, I could peel my face down and off. Shroud of Turin style. But yeah, I'm quite sick underneath it, I think. I'm being vampired. No Carmilla tomorrow, because tomorrow is Dungeons and Dragons. Yes, the new light. I should probably say something about that too. This is a little... Whoa, don't show the light. Little doohickey that I got from AliExpress. It's called a selfie light. And it just clips onto your phone. So you can take selfies or pictures, normal pictures, in low light environments without using a flash. It's very cool. I got it from AliExpress for, I want to say around $5. And it's got different 1, 2, 3 settings and off. So I just put it onto the brightest setting, onto top of the laptop, and pointed it to the diffuser, the big umbrella covered in white cloth, which John set up for me. Works really well, and it means I don't have to take my bedroom lamp in and out of the living room. So thank you all very much. No Carmilla tomorrow because it's Dungeons and Dragons, and think about what I should read next. Somebody suggested The Turn of the Screw, which could be quite good. Thank you all for joining me. See you on Monday. Bye.